Hello, my name is Roger Mosby, and I'm President and CEO of the Boy Scouts of America. Thanks for inviting me to your meeting today, and thanks to your Council Commissioner, Melody Wiseman, your Scout Executive, Lee Shaw, and your Assistant Council Commissioner, Gary Euler, who reached out to me to be part of your meeting. I'd like to say hi also to all the Scouts and Scouters and WD Boys Council. I hope everything's going great. Given today's environment of social distancing and almost no travel, Zoom has become our friend. I've been asked to speak to you about some of the things going on in Scouting nationally and where I think Scouting is going in the future. First, let me say thank you for your time and money you put into Scouting and are likely to do so in the future. Volunteers are the lifeblood of the movement. Without volunteers, there would be no Scouting in America. Until the beginning of this year, I was a volunteer like most of you and had done that for over 40 years. I was a Scout as a youth and came back into Scouting when my oldest son joined Cub Scouting and came back to be a volunteer in that program. My wife and I have 4 sons who are very active in Scouting, so we followed them through the program as volunteers. Many den and pack meetings, troop meetings, and of course campouts, many memorable times, especially campouts and high adventure bases, and of course Philmont. As our sons became adults, my attention turned from the unit to council things, including at one time I was a council commissioner, the Sam Houston Area Council in Houston. That was followed by many years of area, region, and national committees, and then eventually I had a position with WASM, the World Organization of the Scout Movement. While I was engaged in all this Scouting stuff, my day job was in the oil and gas industry. I didn't know it then, but my experience in merging employee groups and companies and managing through organizational change would come in handy again. You guessed it, for Scouting. The National Executive Board of the Boy Scouts of America looked into the future when they had to replace the previous Scout executive and determined they needed someone with a different set of skills to navigate the waters of bankruptcy and the resulting changes they could see coming in the future. That's where I came in, with a love of Scouting and over 40 years as a Scouter, but with the experience and skills of organizational change. My charge is really in 2 areas. 1, to shepherd the Boy Scouts through bankruptcy, and 2, to move the movement truly into the 21st century. That means, among other things, moving to an all-digital platform for registration, charting and recharging, an all-digital program materials, and ease in navigating the myriad of resource materials available in the Scouting program. I've been asked by your commissioners today to answer a few questions, which I'll do. We'll see how that goes. Some of these questions are common and some of them are not so common. The focus of your meeting today, I've been told, is annual program planning. Annual planning, whether it be for the entire council or a unit, is important because it gives you a roadmap to accomplishing your goals. In Scouting, that goal should always be at its core in support of Scouting's mission: to prepare young people to make ethical and moral choices over their lifetimes, and instilling in them the Scout oath and law. You may have specific things you want to accomplish, but keep your eye on the main thing, the mission, the why of doing things we do in Scouting. And remember too, a plan is just that. I'd compare it to using Google Maps. When you put a destination in, it typically gives you multiple routes. So too in Scouting, it's more about why we do it than how. Here's another question. Amid the current pandemic, volunteers are struggling to keep Scouting going in their communities. How is National prepared to help and support these volunteers? Well, when I was a Scout, we basically loaded into a truck and headed off to camp for the weekend. From a Scout's eyes, it was an opportunity to have fun in the woods. I think it is much the same today. Despite all the technological advances and sophistication, kids still want to have fun. Today, especially in May of 2020, you can't just load kids in a car and a van and head off. We have to observe social distancing. And even if we didn't, in many respects, today's activities take a lot more planning and good execution of activities. National's preparing alternative activities, things that can be done virtually. By all accounts, the National Campaign last week was a very good success, and it brought a lot of program elements into your activities. Activities that most councils don't have the means to provide, like for instance, polar skiers, or an astronaut, or a movie producer. A virtual 5K walk is a good turn for Feeding America, and lots of other activities. I believe you'll see more of this in the future, more of this national good turns, and we're planning a virtual Cub Scout roundup this fall to assist councils in their annual roundup program. National can provide program materials, but as always, You have to insert your ideas and deliver fun that keeps the kids in scouting. Another question, what is your vision for BSA? How do we remain relevant when families have so many youth options to choose from? Well, despite the problems that BSA has had over the years and currently defined by falling registrations and now the complexity of bankruptcy and the child abuse that got us there, the Boy Scouts of America is still an iconic part of American life. Scout oath and law are just as relevant today as they've ever been. The youth tell us they still want to have fun. They want to have fun in programming. They want something that's engaging and worthwhile. We need to make sure that they keep feeling that way. We will not only survive this current challenge, but we'll thrive. We need to do everything we can to keep Scouts safe while they are having fun by preventing abuse of any kind and making sure they are safe. My vision in Scouting, I'd like to see a world where every child has the opportunity to experience Scouting in a safe environment, free from discrimination and harassment of any kind. As leaders, you make an impression that lasts a lifetime. It's an absolute imperative that we make Scouting safe and fun. Another question, what is your best experience in Scouting? I've had many best experiences in Scouting. Seeing my sons attain the Eagle rank, sunrise from the Tooth of Time, and the many friendships I've developed around the world of Scouting. I'm optimistic that my best experiences in Scouting are yet to come. Another question, you come from a current role, not as a professional Scouter, but as a longtime volunteer. How does that help you move our organization forward? How could that also be a hindrance? How can you help? I'm unusual in that I'm the first volunteer that ever served in the role of president and chief Scout executives. Typically, that's a role that's filled by a professional. I don't serve in the role of chief Scout executive. I wasn't looking for a second career. So although I can honor the tradition and contributions of professionals in Scouting, I'm not bound or beholden to it. For better or worse, I see Scouting through the eyes of a volunteer and a parent. I have no agenda other than working for the betterment of the movement. When Baden-Powell started Scouting, it was for a very specific purpose, and that was giving direction to young men in England that had fallen through the cracks during the Industrial Revolution. It very quickly went from a social experiment to a movement that spread around the world in just a few years. It was a movement that survived the First World War, the Spanish flu pandemic, the Depression, the Second World War, Korea, Vietnam, and social changes in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and countless other challenges. Today, it's COVID-19 virus. Somewhere along the way, we changed from a movement to an organization. Somehow, we've got to become a movement again, to survive our current challenges, to put passion back into the program. We can only do that if we deliver programs safely as it's designed. Another question, why is it that units need to complete the annual program planning worksheets? Seems like it's just another thing required to do. It does little to affect the actual quality of the unit's program. As with so many BSA things, it's just a box to check. Well, I'm not much into checking boxes, but I do think annual planning is important. I suggest you make it a learning experience for your Scouts and let the older Scouts do the bulk of the planning. It's a good way to teach and learn and gives them a stake in what's going on. It's a way to be sure that they're getting to do the things they enjoy. Doesn't mean the plan can't be flexible. Devote part of your monthly troop meetings to review the plans for how well they've gone to date and check if the stated plan is still relevant for the remainder of the year. Another question, what would you say to a brand new volunteer who knows nothing of Scouting or history and heritage, nor understands the aims of the organization? I'd say to the brand new volunteer, get ready for an adventure of a lifetime. Sure, it takes more than the old joke of 1 hour a week, and you'll spend money, but for most of us, it's time and money gladly given. I'd say be careful that you don't get so involved in Scouting that it becomes a self-fulfilling exercise that leaves the kids behind, because that is easy to do. It started out to be about the kids, and that is where it should stay. Remember the mission and the role of servant leadership. This is still a volunteer movement. This is about developing kids to be the same servant leaders that you embody. But most volunteers also want to make a difference in the lives of our youth. And if they engage, they will. And they'll find a way of making a difference, and that's what we're all about. The next question is, what do you say to an experienced or veteran Scouter who may be discouraged and not see the organization he or she used to love? Well, to the experienced veteran, I'd say thanks for your service. Your pay has been your enjoyment with working with kids and the many adults that are friends now solely due to scouting. The way we deliver scouting changes, but the mission hasn't really. When the BSA started in 1910, cars and airplanes were new to most of the world, and things like camp stoves, nylon tents, all-season sleeping bags, hiking boots, freeze-dried trail food wasn't even part of the scouters' vocabulary. Today, most of us can't remember when we didn't have those. Actually, I can remember. Things change. Well, I can remember, and I can tell you they're better today than they were. Things change, including scouting, or more precisely, how we deliver scouting to boys, and yes, now girls. Like most things in life, scouting is what you make of it. But remember, we do scouting to provide those experiences for the youth. We need to adapt to the times and their world in order to be successful in the program today. Next question is, with all the headlines we have encountered, from abuse allegations to lawsuits to bankruptcy, it is hard to recruit youth and even harder to recruit volunteers. Why should the BSA be a place where people would want to volunteer? Well, first of all, to anyone who was abused in scouting, and for that matter, anywhere else, we are sorry that it happened. It should not have happened, and as an organization, we apologize to anyone that was abused while in scouting. That's the reason we're in bankruptcy and are committed to both compensate victims through a trust fund and to continue to deliver the mission of scouting to the youth of America. We cannot forget the millions of scouters, the vast majority, that have fulfilled the scouting mission and continue to do so today. Scouters that have protected children in the past and continue with everything they do in scouting today. As an organization, as a society, we have learned from the past that today's scouting is safer than ever before. People should want to volunteer for scouting today, not only have their children in what we feel is the premier child development activity outside the family, but to help with the mission of developing ethical and moral character in others. Children, others' children. I've never talked to a volunteer that I've talked to that has regretted their time in scouting. Maybe they exist, but they're far and few in between. Another question, with so many pressures on our schedules these days, why should volunteers expend time, effort, and money to keep their program going during these periods of COVID-19 shutdown? Our families and our youth need the scouting connections during this period of isolation more than ever. Scouting is a means by which they can safely connect with others and remind ourselves that we are not alone and that there are better times ahead. Scouting can help our youth and our families see the light at the end of the tunnel. And that light at the end of the tunnel will be vital to our nation as we're able to reconnect to the outdoors and to each other. Another question, we are constantly chasing down volunteers to get YPT done. Does YPT or youth protection really help, and how are we comparing to other youth organizations? We touched on this in some previous questions, but youth protection is something we can't afford to get wrong. Scouting's insistence on youth protection training, too deep leadership, and the other measures scouting has taken over the years to protect youth from adults or other youth that would harm them. Yes, youth protection training and the rules around safe scouting help, but YPT serves as a constant reminder of why we must be vigilant and provide the oversight required to keep scouts safe. And if you want to compare our efforts to others, you should know we are considered a leader in youth protection, and many other organizations are using our materials and standards to ensure their youth are also safe in every situation. Another question, many youths feel as though they are constantly having to fundraise to support the program, and the increase in membership fees have blindsided them. How do we keep scouting affordable for their families? Are we pricing ourselves out of the market? You know, in my experience with both PACs and troops and many council activities such as OA events or camporees, I've seen many different approaches in funding activities. You don't have to run an expensive program. You don't have to have a senior patrol go to a high adventure base every year. Or in my experience, you don't have to have a troop drive from Texas to Colorado to summer camp every year. Those things are fun and interesting, and as it relates to high adventure bases, I would say they're part of the experience of scouting. But not every youth has to go every year. Some troops can afford, either through fundraising or just parents providing the funds, to run a very expensive program. Is it necessary to accomplish the mission of scouting? I'd say no. A high adventure experience should be a pinnacle event, an experience remembered for a lifetime. As it relates to registration fees, they're the primary revenue of the national office to provide programming and support for councils. No registration fees would mean no national programming, no national protection of the BSA brand, no national supply, meaning really no uniformity of our uniform program or program materials, no high adventure basis or Philmont, no liability insurance, and many of the other things that happen behind the scenes to make scouting work across the United States. These activities have a cost, mostly people costs, but people that are highly trained and talented enough produce the many things that scouters use to deliver their programming, like training, for instance. And over time, the cost goes up, like everything else. The fee increase last year was poorly communicated, and we will do better in the future. But will the fees go down? That isn't likely. Will they go up? Probably. But I submit to you, you'll have more notice next time. Council boards are charged in having a scouting program for the geographic area in which they're given a charter. As part of that, they need to develop the methods of delivering the program to as many youth as possible. Sometimes that means finding the means, such as fundraising, to help youth that can't afford the program. Next question. We often hear about us, the direct contact leaders versus them, the council professionals. Many volunteers don't see much value coming from professionals, and the fun has evaporated for many volunteers who see council turning it into a job. How can volunteers and professionals work together to keep the fun in the program for everyone? You know, one of my challenges is to break through the many working difficulties that exist between volunteers and professionals. I think part of this is poor understanding of the differences between the roles of volunteers and professionals. Volunteers run the scouting program and professionals support those efforts. If anyone owns the program, it's the volunteers. The scout executive is responsible to the board, and he or she reflects or selects the professional staff that the board authorizes through the budget. They, the professionals, should not be involved in setting the program direction. At the council level, that is the board. Professionals are there to help make sure volunteers are trained, and both volunteers and professionals are delivering the program as the program was designed. Professionals make sure the business of the council is successful and that the units have the support they need for them in order to be successful. When these two groups work together, the result is a successful, engaging program. When they don't, it can be misery for everyone. By extension, the National Council employees cannot directly control a council. We certainly influence the program by the materials and processes developed for all councils to use, but the scout executive is an employee of the council and responsible to the board. I can also directly influence what happens in the council by controlling the charter process and who has and who keeps a charter, and by the commissioning of scout executives and other professionals. But the volunteers own the program. The professionals support the volunteers, and in the council, that's controlled by the board. Do charter organizations really matter anymore? Is this an outdated model that should be revised? After so much disruption and dependency on charter organizations, many are just a name on paper. Why do we need them going forward? Many volunteers don't understand their part in the charter organization, and they don't feel it does anything, they don't do anything other than sign the charter. You know, charter organizations should matter because they are the means to a unit existing, having a meeting place, and many times monetary support, and vetting volunteers to run the program. That's the way it should work. I don't disagree that many chartering partners are partners in name only. That's unfortunate. And my advice to scouting volunteers is if you don't have a good chartering partner, look for one that can support the program. This is an issue on many levels that is being reviewed by national volunteers. I don't know yet which way this topic will fall, but we'll see in the very near future. You know, why should adult volunteers get training? Why do we struggle with getting volunteers to be trained? Why does it seem the program has become way overcomplicated itself in recent years to only confuse and frustrate volunteers? You know, I'm sorry if that's happened, and I think we should do everything we can to get the complication out of the program. But, you know, training is really the lifeblood of a good unit program. Untrained leaders frequently become frustrated and leave the program. I saw that when I was a Cub Master. I saw that in the Boy Scouting program, the same thing. Poorly trained, poorly prepared leaders just either dropped out or they caused kids to drop out. Poorly trained leaders, they deliver a less quality program for the unit, which frequently frustrates both parents and scouts, which results, as I said, in them leaving the unit and scouting. To some extent, the advancement program has led to complication. Should all scouts have the opportunity to become Eagle Scouts? Absolutely. It's not, however, the be-all to end-all. The vast majority of scouts never become Eagle Scout, less than 95%. That's okay. Did we make them better citizens? Did we train them to make ethical choices and moral choices over their lifetime? Do they remember the Scout Oath and Law? That's what really counts. But again, without training, youth may not get a safe, high-quality scouting program. Scouting doesn't have to be complicated. Frequently, it's adults that make it complicated. When the kids, when they only really want to have fun, let's keep the fun in scouting. I enjoyed sharing some of my thoughts today. I hope this helps in your planning process, and I wish my very best to the WD Boys Council. Remember again why you're doing this. Is to prepare young people to make ethical and moral choices over their lifetime by instilling in them the Scout Oath and Law. Keep that in mind and scout on.